In this special episode of the Horror Headquarters, something just doesn't sit right with me when it comes to the parents. Just looking at the beginning of the case, look at all the mistakes that were made from the time of death to today. I still recall first hearing about this case sometime in 2007. Let's not forget all the conspiracies that surround the case of JonBenet. Hello Nightlings, and welcome to episode 7 of the Horror Headquarters. We are discussing one of the most infamous and unsolved cases in United States history, or I should say worldwide history. Now just saying those words sends chills down my spine because it's so difficult to look for a place to start. Now whether you know the story of JonBenet Ramsey or not, just know that this is a very sensitive topic, and I guess I can say listener discretion is definitely advised with this topic. There's a lot of difficult and gory details that I'm going to be discussing, but it's all part of the case in order to educate you guys on the case in order to kind of piece together what really happened that night and try to come to a conclusion. Now I'd figure I'd give a backstory on JonBenet Ramsey before I dive into the horrific tragedy of her life. Now JonBenet Ramsey was a 6-year-old girl, and she was a beauty pageant contestant who was constantly dressed up in, and I quote, sexy clothing given to her by her parents for these pageants. She would sing, dance, act, and perform in front of an audience and win a bunch of awards. Now seeing her life behind camera is definitely very, very scary because she seems very happy and enjoying what she's doing, but at the same time you think, what predator was watching her at this time? Was there a predator watching her at this time, or was it an inside job done by the family? And I have to make sure I'm asking those questions right off the bat so that no one's like thinking I'm taking the parent side or I'm not taking the parent side. I'm stating what the media thought, what the police thought, what many people still think till this day, but I'm going to be giving you the facts of the case and walking you through it. And we'll start on the night that everything turned horrific. December 26, 1996 at 5 a.m. in the morning. Patsy Ramsey woke up at around 5 a.m. that morning to make a cup of coffee and just get ready for the day when she realized that her daughter was missing. She was looking for her when she found a ransom note stating that Patsy's daughter, JonBenet, was kidnapped. But the letter was addressed to Mr. Ramsey. This is the first important clue that I want you guys to keep in mind. The letter was addressed to the father, not to both the parents, but just to the father. Now this ransom note, it's another very controversial piece of evidence, being that this ransom note, believe it or not, was written from the same notepad from one of the parents' notepad in the home. So that means either the kidnapper used this to write down the letter, or the parents wrote it themselves. And the reason I say the parents wrote it themselves is because the amount that the ransom was asking for was $118,000, which was the exact amount that John Ramsey received in bonuses that year. Now, finding this letter, of course, Patsy stated that she was horrified, and keep in mind, this letter stated that if she alerted the authorities, if she told anyone about this, that the child would die. She did exactly that. She called the authorities. She even called her family and friends to come and help her look. This is a big mistake, not just on her part, but on the police's side, because think about the contamination of the crime scene. You have family walking around the house, you have them looking around the house, touching windows, touching doors, going on the floor. That is contaminating the crime scene. And I feel like this is one of the biggest reasons why the DNA samples set in the area do not match the DNA that was found on JonBenet Ramsey, specifically her underwear. Now the police said they did a preliminary search where they went throughout the house, which this is a ginormous house if you guys don't know. I believe it's about 6,000 square feet. It is ginormous, and it's like very unusually laid out, so it would be very difficult for the typical kidnapper to find JonBenet and leave without being noticed. Now, this whole preliminary search was done, didn't find anything, and the police told the family to wait by the phone, waiting for some type of phone call to find out where their daughter is, hoping that whoever took their daughter would end up showing up. No phone call was given. one of the investigators on the scene, one of the FBI investigators, told John Ramsey, who is the father of JonBenet, to go search the house with his friend. The first place they went to go look was the basement, and that's where he found his daughter. Behind a door, she was under a blanket. He picked up her body, contaminating the DNA, contaminating the crime scene, took her upstairs, and was in complete agony of finding his daughter's body. According to the autopsy, she had been strangled, injured, and was sexually assaulted and raped. This is another thing I want you guys to keep in mind. The father found the body immediately. Now, this could be coincidence, but there's something that rubs me the wrong way with this case. There's something that the parents knew, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna say that right off the bat. It's so mysterious. Now, I'm not saying that they did it, but I feel like they knew something was gonna happen, but they didn't take the proper precaution. I'm not sure, but it just seems so mysterious and scary just thinking about the image of how they looked, and it just drives me nuts. But, you know, they're not the only ones at fault. The police are also at fault as well, because they let all these family and friends search the house. They let them look around, and then they have the audacity not to do proper DNA sampling of items that were found at the crime scene. Till this day, they refuse to do DNA sampling, or they refuse to even admit that they're doing it. They're just staying completely quiet and aren't letting anyone know what's going on, not even the family. And completely forgot to mention that when the initial DNA sampling came out and it didn't match any of the family members, the police refused to release those samples, and it caused a media frenzy. The media stated that the reason they didn't release them was because it was the parents and they were going to exonerate them and put them in a jail cell for eternity. But this wasn't the case. The Ramseys stated that the police didn't release it because they so badly wanted it to be the family. The police wanted it to be John and Patsy Ramsey who committed the crime, or someone related to the family, but none of the DNA matched. Now, as you can imagine, when something like this happens, there's going to be a huge public interest, and there was photographers, paparazzi surrounding the house. There was following them everywhere they went, and then it seemed like they could have one moment to themselves to really mourn the loss of their daughter. And I'm not saying they did do it, I'm not saying they didn't do it, but when a case like this explodes in the public and then spreads worldwide, you have to be prepared for all of this attention, for the paparazzi, for the photographers, for the questions, and being silent, being hidden, and only doing private interviews with CNN in 1997 and not telling anyone about them and not even talking to the police. That's suspicious. I'm sorry, that's just suspicious. Going to a big news station instead of actually going to the public and addressing them personally, it just doesn't sit right with me. Now, this was all going to court, and the police submitted evidence to the Boulder County District Attorney in 1998, the evidence that they could find, because like I said, a lot of it was contaminated. And in September, a grand jury convened to investigate, and in October 1999, the grand jury voted to indict John and Patsy Ramsey for child abuse resulting in death, but the district attorney declined to prosecute, citing insufficient evidence. This caused an extreme media firestorm. People were enraged that nothing was done, because when the prosecutor came out, he said, we don't have a conclusion for you guys, but we're just going to continue to move forward. And then the public found out through the people that were on the grand jury that they did in fact indict John and Patsy Ramsey, not for the murder, but they stated that they either did it or they knew she was in trouble and didn't do anything to stop it. Now, starting in the 2000s, a lot of people started releasing documentaries, books, papers, magazines, all these different things talking about conspiracy theories, about people's own walkthroughs, about personal investigators, private investigators, going to the house, carrying out the case from beginning to end, and giving their own feedback on what could or could have happened. Something that the parents constantly state till this day, or I should say John still states, because unfortunately Patsy passed away due to cancer. But John states that there's enough evidence to find the killer, but it's not being done purposely by the Boulder police. Now this story continues to twist and turn. Many people were calling the Boulder police stating that they committed the crime, but their DNA did not match the sample on the crime scene, so they were dismissed. This included Randall Simmons, who was a photographer of the pageants that JonBenet went to, and he had inappropriate pictures of the girls in his room. He was walking down the street naked and would continue to shout, "I did not kill JonBenet." He was downloading child pornography, but again, his DNA was not a match. Another one was John Eustace, who was charged with rape and kidnap. He was a driver that confessed to kidnapping a 2-year-old, and they found a shrine dedicated to JonBenet in his home. But unfortunately, he was clocked in at work when JonBenet died. But this showed that people were out for her, that there were actual predators, people that were going to these pageants, not for the event, but for the girls. And these are just a couple of the many people that had shrines and pictures of pageant girls in their homes. And again, here's another twist. Another girl that went to the same exact dance studio as JonBenet was nearly molested in her house, but her mom stopped the person before they were able to do anything. So you can obviously tell from all of this that the pageant girls were being targeted. So this proves well for the parents in making it seem like they didn't do it. But again, there's so much more that is against the parents that makes it seem like they were somehow involved. And then there comes along a man by the name of John Mark Carr. And I have to be honest, I think this is the most disgusting, horrifying, and traumatic parts of this entire case. This man was emailing back and forth someone that was involved in the case about what he did to JonBenet Ramsey, admitting to what he did, saying that he loved her, that he didn't mean to kill her. He wouldn't even want to use the word kill, he just said that he loved her, but everything that happened was an accident. And he was emailing back and forth, and then finally there was an 11-minute phone call with this guy, and the bureau obviously was listening in. It was a bugged phone. Everyone was listening into what he was saying, and I'm haunted by that 11-minute phone call because he was explaining how he killed JonBenet. He was saying that he was going to take her. He was saying that he wrote the ransom note, but this is where it gets so interesting. His DNA did not match. Nope, it did not match. But there's so much more to this. He knew things about the crime scene that were not released to the public. He knew things that the police didn't even know about that gave them a lot of connections to the case about possibly what happens, because he knew everything. And that just makes it so much more, like, insanely crazy. And he continued to admit that he did it, but again, his DNA didn't match. And this is when people started asking, why are we dismissing people solely based on the DNA? We know it was contaminated. We know that there were other people at the crime scene when this happened. Why are we not taking everything else into consideration? Oh, and by the way, this guy, John Mark Carr, he used to live really close to where JonBenet Ramsey lived. He was a school teacher, and then he moved to Thailand and was a teacher over there as well. He taught at an all-girls school, and they started learning more about his past. And then one of the Ramsey's housekeepers saw the picture of John Mark Carr, and she said that Carr was in his garage a year before she died. That means that you have an outside source, a housekeeper, stating that John Mark Carr looked familiar, that he was in the garage of JonBenet Ramsey's house a year before JonBenet was killed. So unfortunately, John Mark Carr walked freely. So this killer, whoever it is still out there on the loose, whether that be John Ramsey, whether that be Burke Ramsey, whether that be someone else out there, they are walking free from this case. And it just continues to get even crazier, because then somewhere in the 2000s, Steve Thomas wrote a best-selling book that accused Patsy Ramey of killing JonBenet, and that's when the Ramseys sued for defamation for $80 million, and this lawsuit was settled and the Ramseys received an undisclosed amount. And then in 2016, CBS aired a primetime special that accused Burke Ramsey, who was the brother of JonBenet, as being the killer. And then Burke sued CBS. He sued the producers, the hosts, for $750 million. And then again, the lawsuit was settled and he received an undisclosed sum. This exploded all over social media that the brother killed JonBenet. This caused Reddit pages, Wattpad stories, people all over social media giving their own theories, looking at the evidence themselves and coming to their own conclusions. Until this day, a lot of people state that Burke Ramsey is one of the main suspects of this case, being that it was possibly him that did it. He possibly killed his sister accidentally, and then his parents are trying to cover it up because he was underage and they didn't want to see him in jail. So this is something that I've tried to exercise to the best of my ability. I am still looking to it a lot, but I don't think it's too far-fetched, if I'm being honest. There's a lot of suspicion and mystery surrounding this family, as I stated in the beginning of this episode. So many things they won't say, so much that they won't disclose, as well as so many things the police will refuse not to do. And just want to throw out in there that in 2022, a new case was put out there. Like, the Colorado governor, Jared Polis, stated that the case could be transferred to an independent agency when new technology advanced progress the investigation. And then surprisingly, in December 2022, the Boulder police stated that they analyzed more than 1,500 pieces of evidence and reviewed over 21,000 tips, but nothing. Now, this investigation is ongoing, but unfortunately, I personally think this has become a cold case. Like, it's become so stagnant and still that the police have given up, that they refuse to do anything. Just like what John and Burke Ramsey say, there's so many things that have yet to be sampled, but the Boulder police refuses to test them for DNA. And with the technology that we have today, it could be possible that they could find out who the killer is, but again, being the horrible events and the mistakes that were made that night of December 26, 1996, it's so much more complicated and difficult to come to a proper conclusion, being that the DNA was contaminated. And I don't even want to say potentially. It had to have been contaminated. You can't say that it wasn't. The father literally picked up her body from its position, took her upstairs, and there was random people walking throughout the house. The Boulder police didn't get there before the family and friends were there. Family and friends were possibly even assisting the family in cleaning up the mess, cleaning up any evidence, and then unfortunately a lot of things were left behind. But like I said, this is one theory that surrounds me to this day. Now, there is so many documentaries out there that talk about private investigators going to the house, trying to go in and out of the window, saying that it was possible that JonBenet was killed by an external source, but then so many people stating that the only way possible for it to have been done was through the family. There's so many out there. I'm going to try and tag some in the description of this podcast, as well as post some on my page on Instagram, but there's just so much more information. Like, there was apparently DNA that was on the duct tape that was over JonBenet Ramsey's mouth that is directly connected to Patsy Ramsey's clothing. So that just makes you think for a second. Did Patsy Ramsey actually do it? Was that person not too far-fetched when he said that Patsy Ramsey killed her daughter? Now, like I said, these are all theories. It's crazy because John Ramsey, who's the father, stated that the Boulder police are just waiting for him and his son to die in order for them to drop the case and no longer even look into it anymore. Because he believes that that's the only thing that's keeping them from not releasing anything, that's keeping them from not doing any future sampling of DNA. Even though they state they have, there's no proof that they are, and there's still things that should be sampled but aren't being sampled. So it just makes you think, like, are John Ramsey and the police like teaming up with this? Did they commit this crime themselves? And then you think, what was the motive? What was the reason for this? Was it jealousy? Was it anger? Was it frustration? What could it have been? That was crazy because I remember as a kid, I think when I was about 6 or 7 years old, seeing a documentary on the TV that my mom was watching at the time about JonBenet Ramsey, and the picture was like imprinted into my mind. And when I learned more about her, like around the age of 13, 15 years old, I said, I remember watching a documentary about this, about seeing a picture of her and then saying they found her in the basement, and then seeing a private investigator go in and out of the window, walking throughout the house, gathering their own evidence and coming to their own conclusions. And now, growing up in 2024, and recently watching a documentary on Netflix that just released, it's called The Cold Case, Unsolved Murder, I think, and it's JonBenet who's the subject. It was trending on Netflix for about 2 weeks, I'm gonna say, and a lot of people liked it, a lot of people disliked it because there was a lot of information left out, including the DNA that was found on the duct tape, which is directly connected to Patsy Ramsey, the ransom note that was written from the notepad of Patsy Ramsey, the undigested pineapple that was found in JonBenet's body the day that she was killed, which suggests that she was awake at some time in the night and her brother was involved, because maybe that was Burke's pineapple and he killed her accidentally. But this is just a lot of things that were left out of certain documentaries that are out there, especially the Netflix one. This is something that isn't discussed as much because you have that evidence. You also have the behavior of John and Patsy Ramsey because they refused to do any interviews with the police. The time that Patsy called 911, it wasn't until after the family and friends were at the house. And also, if you guys re-listen to the 911 call, at the end of the call, you hear Burke speaking. And I say Burke because you hear a really faint voice saying, "What have you done? Like, what's going on?" And that just makes it just suggest that possibly the entire family was involved in this. Because it just opens so many more questions. All these little details towards the family. When the father finding the body immediately, like going straight to the basement and finding the body, and him bringing the family and friends to the house to contaminate everything so that it would be more difficult for them to find the killer. But something that I struggle to still find is the motive behind it. What motive would the family have behind killing their 6-year-old daughter? Now, this all does connect back to Burke Ramsey, because maybe they didn't intentionally kill her. Maybe it was Burke Ramsey that in fact killed her accidentally, and the parents covered it up. And this is exactly why I say this case is so complex, so controversial, so sensitive, so insanely mysterious. And I come to ask myself every day, will we ever find out what really happened that night? And I hope we do. I hope with recent developments in DNA analysis and with all the technology that we have today, that we could possibly come to a conclusion. I mean, being that I majored in biology and toxicology, I took a class in criminology. There's so many new advancements and things that we could do that we weren't previously able to complete. But it all comes down to, what do they want to be completed? Do they really want to find out who it was? And I'm not talking about the family, I'm talking about the police department, because as I stated multiple times throughout this episode, they refuse to do any new samples. It's like become a very strangled, cold, untouched case, and they're just waiting for the parents to die. I'm not sure. And I'm telling you now, if the parent, John Ramsey, dies anytime soon, and they finally release the results of it even being the parents, then that is going to become another humongous media firestorm. And I hope that whoever it is brought to justice. But the question remains, who did it? Who wrote the ransom note? Who killed JonBenet? Why would they write a ransom note if she was in the house the whole time? Was she taken and then brought back and put in the basement? I don't know. But keep in mind that her time of death was somewhere around 1:30 and 3:30 a.m. If you guys want to learn more about this case, you can always look up books, documentaries on this case. There's so many good ones. Like I said, I will be putting them in the description. If you guys want to become part of this conversation, please leave a comment below on who you think did this, on your own analysis. If you've learned about the JonBenet case through a different way, if you're just now learning about it, what are your thoughts? Who do you think did it? Is there anything that you feel was left out? Is there anything you feel the police haven't done or should have done that night that they can still do today? Is there anything that's lingering in your mind? Please Sound off below, share this with a friend, share this with a family member, anyone that could be interested in true crime, anyone that is interested in the JonBenet case. All this evidence, all this information, it's crucial, and if you can come to your own conclusions, I am more than happy to hear you guys out, to hear your own take on the case, your conspiracy theories. I love chatting with you guys, so whether it's on here, on Spotify, on a different platform, whether it be Instagram at the Horror Headquarters, on Twitter at the Horror HQ, and even on TikTok at the Horror Headquarters. Wherever it may be, I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say. I hope that this episode is able to educate some of you guys on this case, on how insane it is, how much evidence and overlapping things there's going on, all the difficulties, and till this day, how many people are still interested and headstrong on this case, and they're so committed to finding out who it was. I want to take a moment to say thank you, all of you, to anyone that has streamed this episode, to has streamed a previous episode, who has supported me since day one, who has become a recent supporter. If you guys could please hit that follow button, subscribe button, wherever platform you guys are listening on, I would greatly appreciate it. Please make sure to rate us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. This shows these platforms that we are a force to be reckoned with, and being that we means me, because I'm doing this entire thing by myself, it would greatly mean a lot, because I just have so much planned. I have so much more that I would love to do with this podcast, and it's only possible with you guys. So any support, you guys, really, whether it's sharing it to your story, whether it's rating the podcast on Spotify, whether it's sharing it with a friend, whether it's talking about it with a complete stranger, I really do appreciate all the love. And another special shout out to my new short film Visions being released, and all the comments and feedback I've been receiving on it have been phenomenal. There will be an episode on that short film that I created, so make sure to keep an eye out for that. I do plan on releasing one more episode before the end of this year, so keep an eye out for that. Hopefully I'll be able to get to it, because it's a very special episode that I'm excited to share with you guys. But until next time, you guys, take care, tread very lightly, pray for forgiveness, and have a happy holiday and safe holiday, because midnight hour is approaching. 2025 is near.